we're going to get started, I think. Hopefully everyone has made it through the doors. So I'm calling to order the April Transportation Advisory Board meeting. If we can have a roll call, please.
Chair McKee-Burrows.
Here.
Board Member Sterrett.
Here.
Vice Chair Wickland.
Here.
Board Member McInerney.
Here.
Board Member Zortman.
Here.
Board Member Palmino.
Here.
Council Member Popkin is absent this evening. We have a quorum.
Thank you. We acknowledge that Longmont sits on the traditional territory of the Cheyenne, Arapaho, Ute, and other indigenous peoples. We honor the history and the living and spiritual connection that the first people have with this land. It is our commitment to face the injustices that happened when the land was taken and to educate our communities, ourselves, and our children to ensure that these injustices do not happen again. All right, next up is the minutes. Does anyone have any changes to the minutes?
I move to accept the minutes.
I actually do have a change. So, in the call to order, it says vice chair for me.
My old minutes.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I was chair last meeting. So, just that small change. Other than that, you did a call to.
I move that we approve the March meeting minutes as amended.
All in favor of approving the amended minutes?
Aye.
Okay. Next up, we have communications from staff.
Good evening. Chair McKee-Burrows, tab members, Jim Angstadt, Director of Engineering Services. We have a couple of quick info items. First item is on April 22nd of this year, which is next week, next Wednesday. Longmont is hosting an open house engagement event. It is titled Connect Longmont. It will be held at the Longmont Senior Center from about 4 till about 7. It is initially it was started as an event as kind of an open house for some of our capital improvement projects as a form of engagement to get the word out of the work we're doing this year, and it has expanded into pretty much a citywide event. There will be a number of tables, booths that will have staff there to answer questions from LPC, Longmont Power Communications, Nextlight, other city departments such as Strategic Integrations, as well as our several projects that we'll have there that are currently just about to go out to construction. We'll have some traffic information there. We're trying to have a traffic display as well. So it is an event open to the public. There will be some food there that we always try to suck some people into that will come for some free food. So we're hoping to have a good turnout. There'll be some neighborhood initiatives as well and things. So just mark it on your calendars and be aware. We did try to put in some of the news alerts in the packet and the web page. I think if you go to the city website, it's splashed all over the front page as soon as you open it. So hope to see you there. Second item, we wanted to give you an update on a new traffic signal that went active last week or the week before. That is at the intersection of Mountain Drive and Hover Street. It was a signal that was required for the developer to install as part of their annexation, which they did about 15 years ago. They just took quite a while to get their development approved and then finally underway. If you go out there, what you'll see is the initial. There's a apartment complex in the rear, Thompson Thrift, and the lots along Main Street along Hover will be commercial. Currently, I think a coffee shop is looking to come in there, as well as a bank, and then there's some lots that still haven't decided what they're going to be. So that is up and running. We drove through it a few times, seemed to be working. There will be additional cameras that will be installed in the future. We're currently a side project working on, got a grant to do some differing actuation cameras. So we installed a few on Airport Road, and in the future we'll bring back more information as those come online. And that's all I had.
Good evening, board members. Kaylee Fallon, Transportation Planner. The next staff update is regarding current grant awards, and the city has received some responses on several grant awards and applications, so we wanted to update you all on those. So the first grant update, the Colorado Energy Office, we applied for their Accelerator Impact Grant. We applied for just under $500,000, and we submitted that application in February 2026. That application was for the development of a transportation demand management, also known as TDM, policy development or ordinance. We did receive the intent to award notification on March 25th. So we were awarded $535,000, so quite a bit over our initial ask. There is a 5% local match, so that comes out to about $24,000 to $28,000, and we are expected to have a formalized and fully executed grant agreement with the state this summer. The next update we have for you is we applied for the Denver Regional Council of Governments Livable Centers Small Area Planning Set Aside. We applied for $400,000. This was for what we're calling the Colorado 119 Extension hub-to-hub connection. So as you all are aware, there is an effort underway, or it is going to happen, of bus rapid transit going from Boulder down the diagonal up to Longmont, and we are proposing that we would like to study what bus rapid transit would look like to kind of complete that 119 corridor from where it's going to end around Main Street all the way east to I-25. So really wanting to make sure that we are expanding that bus rapid transit and making those connections. So we did receive, again, an intention to award. It was recommended for selection. Those final decisions will be made this week by the DRCOG board, but the award intention did say that recommended our application be fully funded at that $400,000. So again, we're expected to have that fully executed grant agreement with DRCOG by this summer. This grant does not require any sort of local match, so it's really great. And then finally, we have an update on the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant. We applied for $1.2 million. We submitted this spring of 2024, so it has now been 2 years since we applied for this federal grant. It was awarded in August of 2024 at the full $1.2 million. There's a $300,000 local match. Basically, the update on this is that it's still in progress with the U.S. Department of Transportation. It has been quite the journey, but it is expected to be finalized this spring. And that is the end of the grant updates. And then our final update for this evening is an update on the Front Range Passenger Rail Town Hall that was held in Longmont last week. I believe I saw quite a few of the members there, but it was held on April 8th at 6 p.m. at the Longmont Museum. Essentially, the chair of the Front Range Passenger Rail District, John Putnam, was there to explain to community members what exactly Front Range Passenger Rail is, and explain kind of the whole process that they have been going through with a variety of different stakeholders, including CDOT, RTD, and BNSF, to develop this passenger rail, which is intended to go from Wyoming, when it's fully done, from the Wyoming border to the New Mexico border. And so they also explained kind of, as with a project as big as this, it's really typical that these projects start out in phases, and this first phase is proposed to start from Denver to Fort Collins. They're referring to that as joint service because it's seen as an opportunity to collaborate with RTD's Fast Tracks program. These are two separate but related projects. So John kind of gave an overview of what exactly that looks like. He also gave an overview of the funding behind this, and then Harold Dominguez, Longmont City Manager, was also there. He gave an overview of the development projects that are underway in Longmont that are related to Front Range Passenger Rail District, including the First and Main Mobility Hub that is underway, as well as some exciting news about having Front Range Community College have a permanent place right across from that mobility hub. So they had a panelist from Front Range Community College there as well to talk about how great this will be for them and their students and all the connectivity that it'll provide once that Front Range passenger rail has started and once the city has that mobility hub up and running. So just a quick overview, but there was a lot more discussed. There is a link to the online website there if you would like to learn more. They're also hosting a series of these town halls up and down the Front Range all throughout April, so you can find those events online if you are interested. If you weren't able to attend Longmont's or you'd like to just attend another one, you're more than welcome to, and you can find those dates online. And with that, that is the end of our staff updates.
I have a couple of questions. The first one is for you, Jim, and it's about the Mountain Brook Drive traffic signal. Will BRT buses be traveling through that intersection in the near future?
If I recall the BRT route, I believe they will, because they go up, I believe, up to Boston.
Yes.
Yes.
With that in mind, has the intersection been designed to allow those BRT buses to jump the queue at the traffic signal?
I don't believe we have laid in any physical infrastructure for a queue jump lane. There were plans in previously as part of, I think, the Nelson Hover intersection to add an additional lane. But that has been stopped. One of the, as a short-term measure, what we have done, I know on Kaufman Street, is we have provided or will be providing those BRT buses with basically a preemption device that as they approach the signal, they can activate that, similar to what fire and police have. And the signal can go green to or continue to stay green. To help move them along at a faster pace.
And do you anticipate that this new signal and the one at Hover and Nelson will be responsive to the bus preemption?
If we provide the devices, preemption is already installed. The activation, or not the activation devices, but the readers are installed at most of our traffic signals. It would just be a matter of revising doing some work on the signal cabinet and providing the RTD with those activation devices.
That would seem like a worthwhile endeavor. Do you agree?
I do, and we'll have to look into it as BRT comes online.
Great.
Just real quick as a follow-up, I should have noted for that traffic signal, that was funded by a developer. All the costs they provided, upfront costs, although it was installed by the city, they've covered all the costs for that signal.
Great. My next question is for you, Kaylee. You indicated that you're optimistic about the 2024 grant award, Safe Streets for All, that it will actually be approved this year. What gives you that optimistic outlook?
Yeah, so I'm going to call up Liz Youngwinnie, who is our Vision Zero coordinator, who can answer that question or at least help give some insight. Thank you.
It's a good question. So there's a couple things that have happened, and I feel like the thing that I can share with you is that we know that Colorado cities have been receiving their Safe Streets for All 24 funding recently. And there was another thing that happened that was a little like unfortunate. We actually received a different city's contract saying, here's your contract, Longmont. So we're very, very hopeful from these two things that it should be happening. We're just unclear as to when exactly we should expect that. And then furthermore, there's still decisions that need to be made around asking City Council for a match.
Okay, thank you, Liz.
Yes.
Kaylee, what was the scope of that TDM grant?
Yeah, great question. So in our application to the state, we wrote that we would really be leaning on hiring a consultant to work out those fine details of the scope, but a high-level 10,000-foot view of that scope would be that there would be a TDM ordinance in place for new developments, including commercial developments and residential developments. You might be familiar, City and County of Denver has a TDM ordinance for new developments. Boulder recently just passed a TDM ordinance for new developments. I believe Fort Collins might, don't quote me on that, but several cities also have these TDM ordinances. So we did put in our application that we would look to see what these cities have done in their ordinances and not reinvent the wheel and kind of copy their best practices. A lot of those ordinances come in different tiers, so there would be different requirements for different size developments, different types of developments, where those developments are located, whether they're located near transit or not. So to answer your question, we don't have a fully scoped out scope, but we will be hiring a consultant to help us with those details.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the updates. The town hall was very interesting. I don't know how many, there was a lot of us here or there. But Kaylee, were you able to be part of the call the next day after the town hall where there was supposed to be some financial announcement?
I was not able to be part of that call, but Cammie Edson, our planning manager, was. She's unable to make it tonight.
Okay. I was able to get the slides, so just so that the board knows, the RTD peak service study, the capital cost was $650 million. Then the state had a study for Denver to Fort Collins, $885 million. Well, the final total cost now is going to be $333 million. So I don't know where they found the savings, but it's half essentially, with operating, and that's a capital cost, and then operating costs around 25 to 35 million. So much less than what I think has been advertised, and unfortunately they couldn't announce that at the town hall, with some members of the public being antsy about those numbers. But I would like to point out to the public that, the 7 miles of I-25 expansion cost $350 million. So that is 333 is nothing for, 100 miles? Fort Collins to Denver? Is that about right? So, and then also for a ballot initiative, I don't ever recall getting the ability to vote for a highway expansion, but apparently I have to vote to approve a train. So I'm would gladly see it on the ballot sometime soon.
Okay. I have a question for you, Kaylee, about the Dr. Cog grant. So the intention is is a study to determine like feasibility, costs, that type of thing. Is that right? Okay. Okay. And then what would be would you give the feedback to RTD after doing that study? Like, what would be kind of the process of bringing that to fruition?
Yeah, I imagine that we would involve RTD throughout the process to make sure that they were aware of the study and to make sure that they were up to date. And, we're always actively in conversations with RTD. So to answer your question, yes, we would involve RTD.
But then they weren't part of this grant application, right? They weren't a party of it?
No.
Okay. Okay, any more comments or questions? Okay, public invited to be heard. I see no public. No. Okay, all right, so now we're going to move on to information items.
All right, great. Well, our first information item for this evening is an update on Ride Longmont. So as you may recall, for those of you who were on the board last year, we did give a 2025 annual report in December of last year. So this is not an annual report. This is a quarter one overview and then a year two preview. If you need a refresher or are interested, I would highly encourage you to go back to the December tab meeting minutes and notes to kind of get a refresher on that annual report. So as I mentioned, the agenda for this evening is a data overview and survey results for quarter one, and then a year two preview, including funding and upcoming outreach efforts. So data overview for this quarter, which is January 1st through March 31st, 2026. Ride Longmont had just over 21,000 completed rides. We are looking at about 7,000 rides per month. This is pretty notable because this is up from our monthly average in 2025. If you'll recall, we were seeing about 6,000 rides per month in 2025. These first 3 months of 2026, we have seen that increase quite dramatically to 7,000 rides per month. And on that kind of similar note there, we're seeing about 250 to over 300 rides on a typical weekday. We actually just broke a ride record last week on April 10th for 310 completed rides in a day, and that was a record that we set. So the service and the demand for the service is increasing, and the service is able to meet that demand. So we're really excited by these numbers. It's not on this slide, but we are seeing kind of steady about 150 rides for Sundays and for holidays, and that was pretty typical and kind of stayed the same as it was all throughout 2025. So no change in Sundays or holidays, but quite a big change in rides per month and rides per day in this first quarter. So we had a total of 34,106 ride requests. Out of those 34,106 requests, the service was able to meet 28,552 rides. So that means that there was capacity for that rider. And so if you do the math, that comes out to 83.3% demand rate. The demand rate is kind of what I just mentioned. Is the service able to say yes or meet every ride that is requested? If you'll recall, in 2025, in that annual report, we were hovering about 85% met demand rate. So it is a little bit of a decrease there, but nothing really crazy and nothing of concern there. It just really shows that the demand is still there and it's still increasing. As I mentioned, 21,056 completed rides and 61.7 completed rides rate. So that number is the number of ride acceptance. We are seeing quite a bit of rider growth still, which is great since the service has been active for over a year now. But we did see over 1,000 new accounts created. I'll caveat that that's just the account created. That doesn't mean that the person who created the account ended up taking a ride, but they at least had interest in creating an account, which is great. We had just over 700 riders complete 5 or more bookings, which I think really shows that there are a lot of folks that continue to use the service and repeat users. And then we had 2,668 riders that made at least one ride request. In terms of travel distance over this first quarter, there were 56,485 total miles traveled with riders on board, and that's, including all 6-7 vehicles there. The average ride distance was just about 4 miles, and the average ride duration was just about 13 minutes. I apologize, this is a little bit hard to see, but these are the top destinations through January 2026. So I wasn't able to get the quarterly data in time for this presentation, but I can at least show you those top destinations through the end of January of this year. And as you can see, most of the destinations are commercial destinations, so Walmart, Horizon Park shopping area, King's Supers, the Parkway Center, shopping off of Hover, shopping off of Nelson and Hover. The downtown area is very popular, so we're really seeing that the service continues to connect folks to those essential services, those grocery stores, running daily errands. You'll see there's a little dot kind of on the southwest for offices and retail, so connecting people to work there, and then the Clover Basin villages. So we are seeing quite a bit of use from multi-family housing there as well. So this slide really just shows that the service continues to connect our community members to essential services, and is a good kind of economic driver for the city as well. So in January 2026, Via Transportation, which is the operator of Ride Longmont, as a reminder, the city does not operate the service. We don't hire the drivers. We have the third-party operator that does that. They sent out a survey to riders electronically, and they had 150 respondents, which is actually a very good turnout for surveys, especially in this day and age when folks tend to have a lot of burnout around surveys. So we were quite pleased to see that number. But just wanted to share some of these survey results with you all. I think it's really powerful to hear this anecdotal evidence, to hear the quotes from the riders themselves, to see really kind of what the community members think of Ride Longmont and how they are using it. So from the survey results, 91% of the respondents agreed that the access to Ride Longmont makes Longmont a more desirable place to live. And on a similar note, 93% of those respondents would be disappointed if they could no longer use the service. And on the right-hand side here, we have a quote from someone who has used the service since day one, and they use it to go to the senior center, to go to downtown, get to the gym. I want to highlight, they say that they use it so often, they know the musical preferences of most of the drivers. So I thought that was kind of a fun anecdote there to show just how connected this rider has been to the service, and how they take it so often that they're making relationships with the drivers, and it's just building community. So I thought that was great. Something that's really interesting and stood out to me is that 48% of the survey respondents actually use Ride Longmont as their primary mode of transportation. But even more interesting is that 44% of the respondents have access to a personal car, but they continue to use Ride Longmont despite that. So they see the service as quite valuable and efficient. They're using Ride Longmont instead of hopping in their own car, which is great. That's what we want to see. And then just some more quotes from the survey. Having this service has eased this person's worry about getting to work and day-to-day life. Without it, they'd have to, wait a long time for the buses and in inclement weather. This person says that they use it because they have no other option. They don't have a car and they're low income. So really the key takeaways from this survey and from the data that I just provided is that we are continuing to see quite a high demand from the community. Many of the survey respondents were low income or their household didn't have a car, and affordability of the service was mentioned multiple times throughout the survey. We do know and we are aware that the feedback from the public continues to mention a desire for expanded hours of operation going later into the evening. So we definitely are keeping that in mind, but it's just a matter of our budget. So jumping down to that last point, the service is running at full capacity and at our budget. So at this moment in time, we are not able to expand hours of operations or add a vehicle. But that is definitely something we are aware of and want to do in the future. And then, of course, the issue of increased wait times is just really a function of supply and demand. So the fact that we have seen the demand continue to rise, but like I just mentioned, are unable to increase supply due to budget, just means, unfortunately, that wait times will increase. But again, we are aware of that, and we would like to address that with our budget when we can. Okay, so that was an overview of the first quarter and kind of where we're at. This kind of second half of the presentation will look into a preview of this upcoming year, and we'll start off with funding. As I just mentioned, our budget is a big constraint in expanding this service, and so I wanted to just show a breakdown of our grant funding. So this slide will be maybe familiar to you from our annual report, but this just shows the 3 grants that we have and the timelines for that funding. So for RTD, the service is funded the majority of it is funded through the RTD partnership program, and through that first round of funding, we applied in 2023, and we were awarded just over $1 million for 2024, 2025, and 2026. And then in 2024, we were awarded federal money through the Congressionally Designated Spending Funds, CDS. We were awarded a total of $1 million for 2026 and 2027. We have decided to try to spend that $1 million down as fast as we can, so I put that all in 2026, but it's unlikely that we'll spend all of it, and there'll be some left over for 27, just as kind of a little bit of extra there. And then we were awarded $1.4 million through a second application of the RTD partnership funding, and we were awarded $1.4 million, and that was for 2026, 2027, and 2028. So you can see there on the bottom the total amount of grant funding that we have for the service. If you compare that to how much the service costs to operate per year, we're looking at about $1.3 to $1.5 million a year up into 2026 or this year. And then 2027 and 2028, that is expected to increase to about maybe $1.6, $1.7 million a year, just because there is a vehicle service hour per hour increase in those years per our contract. So if you compare that with the grant funding that we have, we, definitely understand that we would like to pursue some more grants. So we know that the 2026 call for projects for the RTD partnership program is currently open, and we are intending to apply for that additional funding that would give us funding for 2027, 2028, and 2029. And we will be asking for quite a bit of funding so that we can address these issues of wait time, extended hours of operation, adding a vehicle to address those challenges. So moving on to upcoming outreach. So just as a reminder, kind of what we have done for community outreach in 2024 and 2025. This is just a list of places that staff distributed posters, informational brochures, and some digital assets too. So, we focused on these community hub areas, including the senior center, the youth center, the library, the rec center, the YMCA. We did reach out to, Boulder County Mobility for All, Boulder County Rainbow Elders, the St. Vrain Valley School District. We went out to some senior housing and senior living facilities and gave step-by-step presentations. So we did do quite a bit of community outreach for the past year. And here is an example of our social media campaign, just as a refresher. But looking ahead to 2026, we're kind of looking into these questions of what demographics or what geographies in Longmont are not using Ride Longmont, and how might we better target these groups with outreach. So, we'll continue to present updates at the tab, at the Senior Center Advisory Board, but what else can we do to target those folks that are not using Ride Longmont? And so just a quick snapshot of demographics. So in general, the demographics or the percent of Ride Longmont trips match up pretty well with the percent of Longmont's population according to the census, with the exception of seniors. So you'll see that box highlighted. Seniors comprise about 11% of Ride Longmont trips, and they comprise about 19% of Longmont's population. So there is an opportunity to continue to raise awareness with our senior population, although capturing that whole 19% might be difficult just due to the nature of seniors might have more limited mobility. They might not be able to take Ride Longmont because Ride Longmont is not a paratransit service. So while Ride Longmont does have the ability to, they are wheelchair accessible vehicles, it is not a paratransit specific service. So it is not like RTD Access-a-Ride or Via Mobility Services. It's not going to door to door. The drivers are not trained to physically assist anyone with a physical disability. And so we recognize that while there is opportunity to reach out to our senior population, we aren't expecting that number would go up to the full 19% just due to kind of those recognizing the reality of Ride Longmont isn't a silver bullet solution for everyone, and that there might be some seniors that are just unable to take Ride Longmont for various maybe physical or cognitive reasons. But other than that, we do have a pretty good match with our disability population and then our youth population as well. And I should mention that the data that's coming from the percent of Ride Longmont trips is coming from the Via Transportation Operations Center, and then the percent of Longmont population, as noted, is coming from the census. And so a little bit more on demographics from a race and ethnicity perspective. Again, Ride Longmont is pretty well reflective of the city's overall population. So we, again, compared different races to Longmont's population according to the census, and we're seeing a pretty good match there. You will see that Ride Longmont riders did indicate other as 10% for their race, and according to the census, that's about 1%. So there's a little bit of a mismatch there, but for the most part, we're seeing about 70% of white riders versus the population of 72%, 22% for Hispanic and Latino riders versus 24% of the total population, 3% for Black or African American riders, and 1% of the total population, and then 1% for Asian riders, and about 3% for Longmont population. So those are pretty well matched up. And then in terms of geography, so the service is widely used across the city, but there is comparatively less use along like the west and southern ends, specifically in single family residential neighborhoods. So the area around Twin Peaks Golf Course, the housing around kind of east of Langman Reservoir, and then in the Prospect neighborhood. These are kind of the pockets where when we look at the map of where Ride Longmont is going, we are seeing some gaps there. So we will think about some outreach efforts to target kind of those single family residential neighborhoods. So looking ahead for this year, 2026, we will continue to monitor those key performance indicators and work with Via Transportation on any challenges or data points that may be concerning. As I mentioned, we'll continue to pursue additional funding sources, including this next round of RTD partnership funding. We will continue our current outreach efforts and start those new outreach efforts. And just want to reiterate that, we are constantly getting feedback from the community. We welcome feedback from the community. We need feedback from the community. However, changes are really dependent on our budget constraints. Funding is the largest challenge to our operations, as I noted earlier. And with that, I am happy to take any questions.
So I'm very excited to see that ridership is up year over year. I am curious, do we have roughly the same amount of service hours and vehicles this time that we're talking about this year versus the same time last year?
Yes, so there's been no change in vehicle additions. So just as a reminder, we have a total fleet of 7 vans. That 7th vehicle is a spare in case of emergencies. So we really only have an active fleet of 6 vehicles, and that has not changed. And then hours of operation remain the same as well.
All right, yeah. The 7th vehicle, you have to have a spare in case, vehicles break down. Yeah. Do we have any data about the income of the riders? And how that might reflect, those neighborhoods that aren't using it as much.
Yeah, so we have voluntary income data, so that data isn't collected when you sign up for a user profile, but Via Transportation did collect income data as part of that January 2026 survey. I apologize that I didn't put that in this slide, but the majority of the folks were low income that responded to that survey. Again, that's only reflective of the survey respondents. But I am happy to pass that data along if you'd like to look at it, but I just didn't include it in this.
All right, thank you.
So I have just a couple of things. Your senior population, from what I have garnered in working here, is probably 55 and older, is probably closer to about 28%. So I'm not quite sure where I'm off on that one. But when we first started, and I attended the meetings when they first started talking about Ride Longmont, they always kept saying it's going to be like Uber and Lyft. For the senior population, I think if you guys could get it actually door to door, I think that would make a whole lot of difference rather than expect them to walk, a block or 2 blocks or something like that in order to get the vehicle. So that's just something to think about. And I have a question about, and this may be something that would be hard to track, but do you have any way of knowing if a person takes a ride one time and don't take it again, why they are not doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So no, we don't collect that data. I don't believe Via Transportation asks or sends out a survey or a question or a push notification. That's definitely something we can consider. I think when we're thinking about these upcoming outreach efforts, that might be something that we ask, as well as if you've ever taken a ride, why did you maybe not repeat the ride, something like that. I don't know because there is an opportunity to rate the ride at the end of your ride. 1 star through 5 stars, 5 stars being the best. I'm not sure if Via Transportation follows up with those folks that rate it 1 star, but that's definitely something that we can consider and look into.
I have, go ahead. You go ahead.
You can go.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. Thank you for the presentation. Do you have an idea about why it was around 5,500 people who requested the ride didn't end up taking a ride? Do you have a sense of why those people didn't end up taking those rides?
Yeah, so my biggest kind of gut reaction to that is probably due to wait times. So someone might look at that and say, no, I need to be there sooner, and they don't take it. But it could be for a variety of reasons. We don't collect that data, so I'm not for sure certain, but I would imagine it's either wait times or they're just kind of testing it out and they're curious and they want to see what that looks like, and maybe they're not ready to commit or they don't want to take a ride, but they just call one just to kind of see what that might be.
Do you plan on collecting that data moving forward, just because it might help you reduce that number if you have that data?
Yeah, that's definitely something we can ask via transportation. Again, they're the ones that create the app. They are able to, they're the ones that make the changes to the app, so it would be coordination with them to see what is possible through them.
Okay. And I thought that the map that you showed where most rides are going to was really interesting. And I was wondering if you have thought about correlating that to considering what potential forward-thinking fixed routes you might have for transportation, knowing that these are the places that people want to go to. And so maybe we should have fixed routes going to all those places on a regular basis.
Yeah, so we did have what we call an executive business review with city leadership. So with our city manager, our assistant city managers, and with Via Transportation back in February, addressing that very question, where we overlaid RTD fixed routes with a map like this. And there are conversations being had at the leadership level of what that might look like. No final decisions have been made, but those conversations have been started. Again, this is just like the first year of data. So I think, once we have quite a few years of data to back up our decisions and our conversations, but the conversation has started. Yeah.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaylee, for all the information. Couple things is you said we're operating at capacity. So is our capacity about 7,000 rides a month? Okay. And what would happen if it looks like it's going to continue increasing? What will that wait time be?
Yeah, so at capacity just means we're at budget, so we don't have room to add another vehicle to address capacity or increase those vehicle revenue hours or hours of operation throughout the day. So there's probably not much more wiggle room for that 7,000 roughly rides a month. It could maybe increase a little bit, but from my understanding, that's kind of we're at the cap there. And so, yeah, to answer your question, it would just be that wait times increase. It's just supply and demand. Right now, our average wait time is still hovering at about 20 minutes. Obviously, we would like to see that go down closer to 15 minutes. I don't know, or I don't have a number in mind for what that would do to the wait times. It would just increase them.
Mm-hmm. And then I think I recall from last year, a cost for another van would be about 500,000.
Yeah, so that's including the increase in vehicle revenue hours, the cost of extra drivers, the van. So it's all encompassing. That's not just the cost. Yes, yeah. But yes, that is the approximate cost.
Do we know an estimate of what it would cost to extend hours to 10 p.m. or something?
Yeah, I actually just asked Via Transportation for that information because I'm currently working on this RTD partnership application and I would like to include that in our application. So I don't have the number right now, but I have asked them for it.
Okay. And then the last one is one of the slides was with demographics. If we could go one more. Here we go. I was confused. Is the other 10% because now we're at over 100%? So I'm just confused what the other comes from.
Yeah,
92, 345, 90. So we're at 96%. Well, I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I'm guessing that when Via Transportation put this survey out, because again, this was voluntary information, this is not collected on a user profile, that there was an option to put either undisclosed or other. I did not double check their math, so there might have been an option to select more than one race or ethnicity that you identify with, so maybe that's why it's not adding up to 100%.
Yep, and it says in the corner, survey respondents can select multiple answers. Okay, that's all right. I was just adding up the numbers. I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me. That's all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Kaylee.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Liz Young-Winnie, the Vision Zero coordinator. This is Carly Seif. She works at Fair and Piers. You all have met her before. She was here last month representing Boulder County. Carly and Fair and Piers have been working with us since middle of January on a couple of very specific deliverables. We went through a short contracting period with them, and we're coming up on the very end of what the work did. This is all part of the Vision Zero action plan. So this is some of the work that we've been doing behind the scenes as we're waiting for the Safe Streets for All funding to come through so that we can finalize that plan. And the work that Fair and Piers did is something that they have a ton of experience doing, which is part of why we were excited to work with them, and that their bid came in at a level that allowed us to be able to contract with them. And this is like integral data that we need for the Vision Zero work and the Vision Zero action plan. So I'm excited to share it with you today. Just a quick thing on our agenda. We're going to go over the project overview in a little bit more detail, talk about the educational deliverable very briefly, spend the most amount of time in our presentation on the data analysis, and then share a little bit about the next steps for this work as it continues to evolve. Like I just said, we had a 3-month contract with Fair and Piers. We had 2 specific main deliverables that we wanted to work with them to complete. The first was an educational workshop. So really building out a curriculum, a presentation, a workbook that we can use in a couple of different formats. And then this data analysis and recommendations. Like I said, this is all preparing us to finalize the Vision Zero action plan and making sure that the work that we need to be able to complete that is ready to go and kind of in queue and prepared. I am going to pass it over to Carly, who's going to walk you through most of the presentation.
Great. Thank you, Liz, and thank you everyone for your time this evening. So starting with the educational workshops. This component of the effort created 6 trainings. They're interactive workshops intended to be given to decision makers like yourselves, to city staff, or to the public to educate, inform, and empower community members to learn more about the safe systems approach, especially as it applies to Longmont. So these 6 trainings are geared around the topics shown in the Safe Systems wheel. So Safe Systems Overview, which is kind of the kind of benchmark training that would be the foundational elements of the Safe Systems approach, sharing crash data applied to the City of Longmont and empowering community members to understand how they can change their behaviors and be ambassadors to the broader community to provide a safer streets for all users. And then we have a training on each of the 5 elements of the Safe Systems approach as well. Each workshop is accompanied by a workbook, so almost like a little interactive handout to be completed in the classroom and at home to solidify the topics and facilitate a conversation about the Safe Systems approach and safety in general. So these trainings have all been vetted with the Vision Zero Task Force as well as city staff and are ready to be conducted and be given to anyone who's interested, and they'll be added to the calendar of events on the Vision Zero website. And now into the data. So this effort used a cleaned data set for 2022 to 2024. So a lot of what you'll see, there's been preliminary high injury networks developed in the past or preliminary statistics on crash data. This is the latest and greatest data set that uses a geospatial referencing kind of data that has been cleaned and honed and is ready to go. So a little bit of different stats than you've seen historically. So we looked at some of the basic crash statistics, number of fatalities, serious injuries, who was involved in those, where have those taken place. So both spatially as well as that high level information to understand the groundwork of what does safety look like in Longmont over these years. And this is really important to be able to make recommendations, focus where those recommendations are to have the most cost-effective uses of resources for a City of Longmont to see improvement in safety in the future. So I'll share a few maps that show the outcomes of our data analysis. The first is what's called a high injury network, which many of you are familiar with. I know when Cammie was in Liz's position, she presented this probably about 6 to 8 months ago. And these are the subset of roadways that experience the highest number of crashes. So we see here is about 9% of Longmont roadways that experience over 70% of the fatal and serious injury crashes. And this helps guide the city and you all on where to make investments in safety improvements. So if you focus on the blue lines, that will return the highest that'll be the highest return on investment of where there can be crash reduction. So these locations see a higher than average number of crashes for streets that are of similar characteristics. So the high injury network is looking historically where have crashes already taken place. The safe systems approach says we want to get ahead of crashes and think proactively. We don't want to wait for crashes to happen. We need to anticipate where is the next crash going to happen so we can make improvements in those locations. And that's where this high risk network comes in. What this looks at are what are the characteristics of roadways that have historically seen crashes, and where do we see those similar characteristics in places that maybe we haven't yet seen crashes. So the kinds of things we're looking at are multi-lane roadways, signalized intersections, actually locations with bike lanes or shoulders, because we know those bike lanes and shoulders often need to be upgraded to protected bike lanes, or shoulders need to become bike lanes. So we saw really high correlation between those facility types and crash history. Zoning, so higher density, those are demand generators for people walking and biking. So we basically combine all of those characteristics to create this high risk network. So we call this the HIN and the HERN. And then lastly, we developed what's called the level of service of safety. So the LOSS is looking at intersections and looking at the severity of crashes at those intersections and number of crashes at those intersections, and comparing to across the state an intersection of similar characteristics. Does this have a higher than average number or severity of crashes? So we'll look at an arterial meeting arterial, two-lane roadway meeting a two-lane roadway. If we compare that to other two-lane arterial locations across the state of Colorado, do we have a higher than average number of crashes? So this is the map showing the severity of crashes. Do we have a higher number of severe crashes? And what this says is there's an opportunity to reduce the number of crashes. If we were right at the average, then we're not going to see this high opportunity for reduction. If we're above average, then we'll see that opportunity. And what this is kind of taking us to the next step is if we just looked at the crash hotspots, we'll see all of those high-speed, high-volume roadways pop up. That's not necessarily going to have the disproportionately higher number for that location type. It's just going to tell us, oh yeah, of course, high speeds, high volumes, we'll see a lot of crashes there, and there might not be a great opportunity for crash reduction. So we really want to look at average crashes compared to locations that are of similar nature across the state. So all of that came together to identify what are the top locations where we have an opportunity to reduce the number of crashes, where we'll see a really high return on investment if we implement solutions, if we implement countermeasures. And these are the 19 locations that rose to the top. There's a combination of roadways, or intersections that are on CDOT roadways, as well as intersections not on CDOT roadways. It's an important distinction as far as roadway ownership and making sure that there's support and resources behind implementation. So it's in these 19 locations where we came up with a list of really specific, what we call countermeasures. We tied those countermeasures to the types of crashes that were happening at those locations so we can be sure we're targeting those exact movements. So if we're seeing a lot of left hook turns or broadside turns, a vehicle going left that is having a collision with a vehicle going straight, we know that maybe making that intersection into a protected left turn instead of a permissive left turn would be effective. So with that, and building on the foundational data analysis, we provided those countermeasures based on crash type. So for each of those 19 locations, what we have is what's called an intersection cut sheet. It provides a summary of the kinds of crashes we saw, who was involved in those crashes, bicycle and pedestrian involved, vehicle movement, that LOSS score that I talked about, is it on the HIN or the HERN? And then we looked at what the recommendations are specific to those crash types at those locations. And while we focused on those 19 locations, we provided what are called decision trees for other locations that were not specifically identified. So we created a flow chart to show if you're seeing a lot of those broadside left turning movement crashes, here are the types of solutions that you'll want to look at. So this flow chart walks city staff through what to look at and what to consider, and then basically ends at the suite of countermeasures that would be most effective at that location. And then I think Liz will share on next steps.
So our next step is really working toward the action plan completion. As you know, Longmont is using the safe system approach to reach the goal of reducing fatalities and serious injuries to 0 by 2040. Additionally, in addition to meeting with you all, we're also talking with council at the end of this month to share the information about this project. The data analysis is also something that will be publicly available. We're currently working with our GIS specialists to create what's called a hub site. So it's a GIS-based web page that will provide the dashboards that have existed in the past, the crash data sets that exist now, as well as the maps that Carly just went over. There's also things that Fair and Peers did that we didn't really talk about, which is that they updated the story map. For those of you who were here last year in 2025, Fair and Peers worked with the City of Longmont to create a story map about Vision Zero, about the crash data. In this contract and project, they have updated that for us to reflect, like Carly said, the newest data that we have available. And then, as we've already spoken about tonight, continuing to see what happens with our Safe Streets for All money so that we can complete this work. And tonight's feedback. What we're really hoping to hear from you, and using the couple of attachments that we provided on the 3 maps that Carly just went through, the HIN, which is the High Injury Network, the HERN, which is the High Risk Network, and the Level of Service of Safety, which is a mouthful, and we call it the LOSS. So the 2 questions that we're really looking for you all to help us through tonight is, what suggestions do you have to improve the readability of these map deliverables? And secondly, what ideas do you have to more clearly communicate what these maps are to the public? As you just experienced walking through this presentation with us in pretty short fashion, it's fairly complex and it's not super straightforward, but we do want to always provide plain language to our community members and present the information in a way that will make sense, which can be really difficult when we're talking about complex maps and data and what that means and how these analyses work. So we would love to hear your feedback on those things, and we're going to be answering your questions. And I can go around if it's helpful, like to go to the attachments or whatever, please just let me know. But I think you should all have them on your computers. Okay.
Did you say that level of service safety for bike ped was specifically developed as a function of this project, or is this a standardized, similar to the highway level of service safety? Is it used to magnify, to demonstrate the magnitude of safety issues for different classifications of roadways? I'm just trying to see if it's I'd never heard of this particular usage of it this way. I don't know if it's a standardized part of Vision Zero programs or not.
Yeah, so it's a little confusing because this is different than level of service, where we talk about seconds of delay for vehicles. Level of service of safety is a standard methodology as well as output just for safety, not related to the LOS that we're used to hearing about seconds of delay at intersections. This is around safety and a different standard.
Yeah, and that's what I meant. Is this similar? The bike ped level of service safety, is that different from the level of service safety for highway usage? You know, the original concept, I think, or that was applicable to highway safety. Not really, in my understanding, it's not really at the beginning of that concept. It was not including bike peds. Does that make sense? The original concept of level of service safety for highway purposes.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it builds off
Okay.
of the previous LOSS.
Yeah, I was just trying to make that comparison because I had never seen it used specifically for bike ped safety issues.
Yeah, and this isn't just about people biking and walking. This is safety for all
Okay.
users. So we do
So
it.
it's the
There's
whole.
2 LOSSs. There's total number of crashes, whether it be vehicle on vehicle, vehicle on bike, and then there's one that looks at severe crashes. So fatal and severe injuries, whether or not there are bicyclists and pedestrians involved.
Okay.
Those do tend to be disproportionately impacted in fatal and severe injuries, but the LOSS analysis doesn't pull people walking and biking out specifically.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks for the presentation. I was able to understand the hin and the hern pretty well, but I struggled a bit with the level of service of safety graphic. Now, when I looked through our packet, I saw that same map presented with the title Locations with Above Average Severe Crashes. And it had a key, a color dot key, and the metric identified is severity, which I think makes sense when you're talking about above average severe crashes. When you take that same map and you call it the level of service of safety, and you still use severity as the metric, you lost me there. It doesn't seem like severity is the right term to be using to describe that graphic when you're talking about level of service of safety. Because maybe a lot of people haven't heard about vehicle level of service, which you just described, but I'm not sure if anybody is going to understand severity as the measurement for safety level of service. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, thanks for pointing out that discrepancy. We did make some modifications after the tab packet was submitted. So the reason for those differences are updates in the last week, which we meant to point out in our presentation. So we wanted to be consistent in the terminology being used. So we switched to level of service of safety just to be consistent in our facilitation question and the map and the agenda, and just have everything be consistent. But that original header you're seeing of disproportionately high crash rates is really that kind of tagline of how to explain it in a way that is a little bit more meaningful than the LOSS title. And then the legend item of severity is to distinguish between LOSS total, that's looking at the number of crashes rather than the focus on severity of crashes. So I think we could change that legend to your point of something that acknowledges higher than average severity, lower than average severity. So I appreciate the comment of the legend and unpacking, using the legend to unpack a pretty technical topic.
Yeah, I think you might look at traffic levels of service and how they're laid out. It's A, B, C, D, and E. A lot of people understand A is better than C, which is better than E. If you could come up with something like that to describe level of service safety, I think your graphic would be better understood by a lot of people, including me.
Yeah, that's helpful. The standard uses 1, 2, 3, 4, I think, to differentiate from LOSS ABCD. So I think including the 1, 2, 3, 4 for those who are familiar with this kind of standard approach, but then also unpacking that with an explanation.
Or maybe your key could have a little description next to each of the numbers or letters, the way vehicle LOS graphics present it.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I'm still kind of chewing over some of my questions, but I have a few I can go with right now. Okay, so looking at the maps, I noticed that on 21st Ave between Hover and Main Street, there's several intersections that have pretty severe level of service of safety markings on them. So this is going to be on the north edge of town, just west of Main Street. But then I don't see that road really showing up on the high-risk network or on the high-injury network. So I'm curious why we have that noticeable difference in the data.
Yeah, that's a great observation. So they're measuring slightly different things. So just because it has a higher than average number of crashes doesn't mean it actually has a high, that it rises to the top in the city of Longmont. What it means is for a probably collector, it's higher than we would expect. However, when you're looking at other arterial locations, those have a higher number of crashes. So that's what, and of why it's important to look at crash data from a number of different perspectives. Those locations might have just 3 crashes, but 3 is going to be disproportionately higher than the average across the street.
Okay, so level of service of safety, what we're looking at in this third map is not necessarily, these are the highest injury crashes. This is just intersections that have frequent crashes.
It's the locations that have a higher number of crashes than you would expect compared to similar locations across the state. And that number could be 2 or 3.
Yeah, and so in the case of 21st, it would probably be because it's sort of this weird split road thing that isn't really typical or seen in other places. Okay.
Or there's something about those locations that are causing a crash risk that mean if we go in and we make change to signal timing, that we'll see a big reduction.
Well, there's only the one light down here, but there's a irrigation ditch running down the middle, and then it's 2 lanes each way on either side of the ditch, and so you have this weird kind of, you can fit 2 cars maybe between the sides, and it's kind of a mess. But I think everyone here is somewhat familiar with the mess. But yeah, that's actually really, that helps clear up some of the data differences. In terms of how to present this, I don't know, I think that something that might be very visceral for people is showing some of the highest risk factor intersections, be like, hey, this is what we're looking at. Do you want your kids around here? Like kind of framing it in like, the high risk network is basically the roads you wouldn't let your kids play near. But so my brain is very interested in the high injury network and the high risk network and how they interact. And I kind of really like to see some sort of overlay that can kind of compare the two. And that's just, my curiosity and want to understand.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the thought we had. So we have that map as well. We tried to be really strategic in what maps we included. So we've got a blue hen, a red hern, and then a purple overlap. And it is really interesting where they differ and where they overlap. So we can, I think, share our full deliverable, or at least that additional map as well. So that was where our brains went to.
All right, cool. Yeah, so glad I've got a good instinct on that. Okay, so then the another map that was interesting to me, the equity priority areas. How did we determine what those areas are?
Those are federally determined. So that was
that's coming from some federal thing, and we're just copy pasting.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And then when that GIS data site is available, can that be shared with the board?
Yes.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, the data site is interactive web maps. So even if you don't have GIS, you can zoom in, you can click on lines, you can see some of the attributes behind it. So it'll unpack some of those pieces.
I can add just one piece about the hub site coming up. We're working with our GIS specialist. He actually today just sent me what we hope is the final version. We are planning to have that ready for the council meeting on the 28th. So around then it'll actually go live, but that'll be really our first presentation of it to decision makers in the community.
Well, thank you, Carly and Liz. First, unrelated, you don't even have to answer this, but to a fellow board member about 21st. I know 4 or 5 years ago in the bike committee, it was discussed how 21st was overbuilt. So actually there's room for improvement for bikeability as well. So, and I hope that's still in discussion. It actually came up in my own discussion today, earlier with some people. But I think, all the other board members have good points and kind of clarification issues. If I'm just a member of the public looking at this, all I see is, all right, well, how come my intersection's not there? I think people can wrap their head around that. But then also, more importantly, they're going to say, all right, what are we doing? And that's where kind of that goes to Jim someday, after the action plan. But I did love in the presentation the equity priority area. I think is also something that should be published to the public, because from my experience in the city is sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I'm, I can reference 2 months ago we were talking about 17th and Lakeshore, and I don't see that on any of these slides. So it's a very process oriented way to actually defend what we're doing and why we're doing it, to benefit the most and get the most bang for our buck. So I think it's a great presentation. I'm excited for an action plan. Been waiting for 4 years. So it was Vision Zero is actually the reason I joined the board, and I'm glad I'm going to get to be a part of it. So thank you.
Okay, I hope all of our Vision Zero team and our board members remember this document. And for the record, I held up a multicolored chart that's titled Vision Zero Action Plan Project Timeline. And unless I'm reading it incorrectly, or I don't have the second page, it shows the entire project, including the action plan development, being finished by April 2026, which is now. Now, I understand that there was some federal funding. It was at the Safe Streets for All. Now, that's referred to as Plan A on this graphic, but there's also a Plan B, and I find that to be the most interesting part of this timeline. Plan B says that if there's no federal funding, the city will fund Vision Zero for 2025. So my question is, what happened to Plan B? And did we lose an entire year of the timeline waiting for federal money?
I've never seen this timeline because I'm new. And not having it available in the attachment, I'm not sure if I can adequately answer your question tonight.
Anybody
I
from
wonder-
the city remember Plan B?
Jim, do you have any context or information that you could share tonight without having it available to look at in our hands right now?
So we at staff spend significant time making plans, setting up plans, and best laid plans of mice and men get thrown out the window when something else pops up. That was a schedule we had laid out, I believe, several years ago. One of the challenges, we have put a lot of effort into that grant, Safe Streets for All grant, to initially finalize that Vision Zero action plan. Initially, the plan was the city would self-fund it, and there were other priorities that came up, and there is not enough funding within the street fund to fund that effort. Other priorities popped up. Budget will be discussed next at the next meeting, but that's the best answer that I can look at. That we made decisions were made at higher levels to move other projects along, other efforts along, and the downturn in the economy that we've seen, we're just not seeing the revenues were coming into the street fund. It's pretty much flat. So as we planned in the last year and a half, as you know, every month we get a report from Teresa Malloy, which shows our revenues. We, as part of budget, we will look at, we make a number of assumptions. We track our budgets mostly monthly in the street fund and TCIF and storm drainage, and basically, an agreement to self-fund may have been great on a spreadsheet, but in reality, it just wasn't feasible.
Was any street fund revenue allocated to the Vision Zero planning process in 2025?
The funding, yeah, we funded about $150,000, which we utilized. It was in operating, so if we don't spend it in that year, we either, there's an opportunity to move it forward into the next budget year, but we utilized it to start building the action plan and the education component of Vision Zero, which was funded the data you're seeing now, that component.
Is my memory serving me well? The street tax revenue is about $25 million per year.
I think I may have quoted that. I'd have to look at what a budget is, but I think it's more like 20. Could be 25. It's somewhere in there.
The last time I asked you, it was 25.
Was it 25? There's also, I want to be clear, and we can bring those numbers next month. There's also funding that goes into the street fund, the state highway users tax. So we get about $3 to $4 million from the state as well that goes into the street fund, and there's some other revenues. We can present those and get the current picture and have that for you next month.
Okay, so am I correct in saying that Vision Zero kind of lost the year 2025 because of the delay in that federal money?
I think we lost a lot of momentum with those delays, and what's critically important from the funding perspective is for us to chase future Safe Streets for All dollars from the federal government. We are required to have that action plan or a safety plan of some kind, and it's we initially looked at it 2 years ago when Safe Streets for All came out. Can we put projects in? And the answer was no, not until we had that plan. And then with the change in 24, a lot of grants got cut out. We lost a couple of other ones as well by the feds. So we did lose significant momentum at that time. That was driving us forward to get the action plan completed.
I can interject as well. Thank you, Jim, for stepping in and clarifying some of the things that I'm just not totally familiar with. So I'll make sure to check out the timeline and just get that historical information. We have not done nothing. the work that we're doing right now in this data analysis, the educational components, cleaning up the data from the state, all of these are critical pieces that we're saying are part of the action plan. This is all work that we would normally be doing during the action planning phase. So we're doing that work without the Safe Streets for All money. We're anticipating receiving that future federal funds, the Safe Streets for All funding that we were awarded but have not yet received. That'll work toward completing the action plan. There's also 2 other components that are funded within that. One is a site distance study, and the other is an evaluation of a near-miss camera system that would be installed at key intersections around town. So it's a really large project with 3 components. And over the past, definitely since I've been here, we've been working on this. And when Cammie was in the position through 2025, and I'm not actually super clear on exactly when she started, there has been work happening. We have an active task force. We meet every other month. So there's still a lot of work and momentum, despite the lack of having a completed action plan right now, which Jim just said, that makes us eligible to receive specific types of federal funds in the future. So it's definitely something we want to try, that we will complete. We're not going to try to complete it. We will complete it. And Carly can speak a little bit to some of the work that happened before I got here as they were working on some of the consulting pieces.
As some of the other 2025 Vision Zero efforts included the story map, the interactive story map that has a lot of the data that's publicly digestible and kind of graphical ways. We talk about distracted driving and the different types of behavioral elements, so not just the data, but the human side of it, of why crashes are happening. We created a fact sheet that we came in the fall and conveyed to everybody and is distributed as part of the task force 2 that also unpacks a lot of the technical side to have community members understand Vision Zero more. And then we created a application for the Vision Zero Network, which is a nonprofit that nationally creates designations for communities, and have that application basically ready to go once the Vision Zero action plan is created. And then we also synthesized all of the community outreach that was heard during the transportation mobility plan process to understand what we heard with regards to safety. So we already have a lot of the community input ready to go, understanding which elements of the safe system wheel do people feel most that Longmont needs to invest in most, and really understanding who we've heard from and what their input is with regards to safety, which will really streamline the community outreach process when the Vision Zero action plan kind of kicks into full swing this summer.
Thanks for that information, Carly. When your firm, Fair & Peers, was hired by the City of Longmont for Vision Zero, did your scope of work include the Vision Zero action plan?
It includes these initial steps to lead into the Vision Zero action plan, but not a completion of a Vision Zero action plan itself.
We're anticipating putting out a full request for proposals once we receive the federal funding, or whatever the next step around the funding to complete the action plan will be. An RFP is a large, bid proposal type contracting process for those of you that are unfamiliar with the jargon that we use.
All right.
Just to add on, an RFP, because we are the action plan will involve federal funding. We are required by purchasing rules to basically put that out to all general engineering contractors through an RFP process.
Just following up on that last discussion there, what happens if we don't get that federal funding? Is there a new plan B to actually getting the plan done? Because so much is riding on that completion. Are you looking at the next year's budget and thinking about how can we actually allocate enough money for the plan to actually take it to completion?
As part of the budgeting process, which is currently underway, we are looking at what might we need and where might we, what will we not do should that grant fall through. That may require some late additions or late changes to the budget as we get into summer. Initially, there are a number of other priorities currently kind of in line. But as part of the process, any additional asks will go through, the city manager's instituted a different process this year where his leadership team reviews basically all new CIP and all new funding requests will go through. It's a more vigorous process than we've done in the past. But we are still in the process of having some of those conversations about what is needed for 2027.
Okay, thank you. I was just following up from the previous question. So my question's about the maps. So I understand with the maps, but I'm not sure that a general member of the public may understand the differentiation between the Hin and the Hern so much that the high-risk network, while I'm very familiar with all the different types of users for mobility, I think teasing apart maybe between a driver and a ped and the differing risks within the city, I think is important to indicate, especially since we're considering like all the high risk as being the most important, whereas most people are used to considering drivers and driver safety as opposed to pedestrians. So I think that might be a little challenging for the average public to differentiate those changes in consideration, perhaps. And the level of service of safety, this makes a lot of sense to me again in terms of what it means, but I think having so many dots on a map makes it a little overwhelming for so many people. And while having lots of good detail is great, having maybe a more simplified version that can say like this corridor is the most risky, and then you could have a more detailed version available, but just to kind of simplify it, so saying like these are the areas that we, based on comparing to the state, these are the ones that are the most risky, rather than having a million dots.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think we could either fade back or remove LOSS 1 and 2, because what that's saying is these places aren't going to have as high a return on investment. It's really the 3s and the 4s that are above average. So that's a great idea to focus on those.
Yeah. And I do appreciate the question about the severity. I think that I reiterate that severity is not the right measure or the right key here to have for the key. So that is my thought. But I do think that all three give some really good information. And another question I had, but it's not related to the maps, is the countermeasures you mentioned as based on the crash type. I'm curious. I'm sure this will come up later on. But what are those general countermeasures? Like, are you looking at simple things like changing signals? Are you looking at changing intersections completely? What is kind of the range of countermeasures that you are suggesting?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've got a one-page summary sheet that we can share as well that categorizes the countermeasures into 4 different categories. Let's see if I can get these. Site distance is one of them. I think thus the focus of the SS4A application on site distance. Signal timing is huge. So whether that be going from permissive protected, adding a leading pedestrian, or extending the leading pedestrian interval that already exists across the city, changing the all red time. There are a lot of low cost signal timing changes that are really effective, bicycle and pedestrian related, and then I believe geometric. And there's a lot of overlap between those as well. But together, those kind of comprehensively encompass the suite of countermeasures. So in addition to those infrastructure countermeasures, there's also policies and programs that are really important. Thus the focus on education here. But in the infrastructure realm, it varies from signals, changing the geometry of streets, which impacts sight distances, and then focusing on additional infrastructure for people walking and biking.
Okay, thank you. And I'm wondering, in that consideration, you also look at pairing it with budget and saying, like, these are the ones we recommend, number one, because they have the biggest bang for the buck, or this is more of a long-term solution for this type of situation?
Yeah, so that'll be a part of the ultimate action plan that was beyond the scope of this effort to create a cost-benefit ratio that looks at actually monetize a life, look at the crash history of how many people have died or severely injured, monetize that, and then the cost of the countermeasures themselves. And then every countermeasure has what's called a crash reduction factor associated with it. So if it was implemented based off of previous data points, what is its likelihood of reducing crashes, and therefore can create that return on investment or a cost-benefit ratio. And for every location, you'll have one of those cost-benefit ratios, and you can prioritize your projects by where you'll get that highest return.
Okay, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Let's see, other questions. You mentioned 19 locations for. Are those the ones that are the red dots on here? Where are those 19 locations?
It was the fourth map in the PowerPoint, but I don't think in your packet. Yeah, this one.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, I know I wrote down 19 locations, but I don't know where that came from. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other questions or comments? And otherwise, I have one more comment.
Go for it.
Okay. All right. I'm curious about the workshops that you talked about very early on. I think that having those workshops is going to be really important to start educating the public about Vision Zero and rethinking their thinking about roads. Is there like a timeline that you have on how those will be going out to the public? And are you thinking they're going to be like big in-person workshops, or is it going to be virtual, that are available anytime? Like, what is kind of where you're thinking about where they're going to go?
Good question. Thank you. Like Carly had mentioned, there's 6 total presentations. So there's one overview presentation that is very much like, what is Vision Zero? What are the elements? What's some information about what Longmont's doing? Super high level intro. And then the other presentations go into each of the safe system elements. More in depth, about an hour. There's a corresponding workbook that also is like presented alongside the presentations. And it's mostly to think more about what you're hearing and how you could apply it, or just trying to like really reinforce the information, doing some activities, breaking up the presentation pieces. The first one that's going to be done is actually scheduled for May 7th. It'll be at the Senior Center, and the first one will be in English. The second one is in Spanish. It's the following week. It's like the 13th. Also at the Senior Center. So we're starting to roll those out. The person who's doing that is Dylan, who's the community engagement specialist that supports the Vision Zero work. So he and I work pretty closely in partnership on this. And then on my side of the work, I'll start rolling out these overview presentations at a staff level.
I'm glad you asked about those. We barely touched on them in the presentation, but they're really a great resource for the city to have. I just wanted to note that the presentations and the workbooks are in Spanish and English. They're all plain language. They're all accessibility features, so really ready for a broad audience. And they're a spectrum of interactive activities, as well as there's some videos that are really compelling to really drive home these concepts, and facilitation questions. So between each section, there's a kind of breakout question to really get people thinking and start a dialogue to not necessarily collect input, but just to have people understand and drive home what this means to them, and how the city is really investing in making changes, and where to focus those investments.
Okay, great. Yeah, education, I think, is like one of the key things with the Vision Zero, because if people don't even understand what Vision Zero is or why we're even trying to do it, then no one's going to even bother taking advantage of many things. Okay. I had another thought about the high network map. Let me open it up again so I can look at it. High risk network. I'm wondering, because this is mostly focusing on teasing out the bike and ped part, whether I had a complete thought in my head before when I was thinking about this before. So these are places where there is some infrastructure, or there is not any infrastructure, right, for bike and ped.
That's one of 7 inputs into it. So the other one's another of my notes in front of me. Multi-lane roads, signalized intersections, those with 85th percentile operating speed greater than 35 miles per hour, presence of side paths, presence of bike lanes or bike routes, and then the next one's zoning. So areas where the street runs through a polygon where the zoning is mixed use regional center, mixed use downtown, mixed use corridor zoning, and then lastly locations where more than 30% of the surrounding population are considered low income. So we looked at about 30 different criteria, and then we created like a correlation factor, and we pulled the criteria with the seven criteria with the highest correlation to crash history.
Okay. That's a lot of information to pull in. I'm not quite sure the best way you can indicate that you're pulling in like multiple levels of data. That's a challenge, and I appreciate that is difficult to. I mean, this makes a lot of sense to me as someone who bikes everywhere, that these are pretty risky areas. But I don't know. That's a lot of information to bring into one map, and I don't have any suggestions, but I appreciate that you're trying to pull all that information together.
Yeah, we have a version of this with a caption that summarizes that in plain language in a few sentences, and I think we can share that version as well so you can see kind of the recap in a publicly accessible format.
Okay. Anyone else have any comments? Okay. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Now we are on to action items.
So the first action item that we have for you all tonight is to determine the subcommittee for the mid-year candidate interviews that will be happening in May, and to potentially discuss new interview questions. So just as a level set and a reminder, the Transportation Advisory Board terms are considered mid-year, so those terms start in the summer in July, and we're just going with our typical approach, which we've done for several years now, is that we're requesting that 2 members from the current tab join staff in these interviews with the new applicants. The subcommittee is requested to record those interviews, and sitting members up for re-election are required to apply and be interviewed, and they are not eligible to participate on the subcommittee. So the action item is to vote or have 2 members from the current tab join that subcommittee interview panel. These interviews will be held on May 4th from 6 to 8:30 p.m. and I believe they are virtual. Yes. No, they're in person. Just kidding. So with that, we will leave that up for you all to vote on. We did leave space to discuss if you would like to add or edit any interview questions. That is only if desired. You are not required to.
Yeah, I cannot volunteer because my term is up. So anyone but me can volunteer for IC.
I volunteer to be on the committee.
Yeah, I'll volunteer.
Okay. Do we want to make any changes to the interview questions?
Oh, no.
Oh, wait, are you volunteering?
No.
Okay. Did you want to? Are we making any?
Are we talking about questions?
Yes, I'm asking about the questions. Yeah.
When I looked at the existing questions, it seemed to me that the last 2, I think it's 6 and 7, are kind of redundant, and perhaps they could be combined. My primary concern in selecting new board members is that we find people who are willing to look at the whole gamut of transportation measures and transportation modes that the board addresses. And so I'm looking to not select people who just want to join the board to get a speed bump in their neighborhood, for example. That someone with a particular axe to grind. And I thought that those last two questions were pretty good at teasing out what people's motivations were for volunteering for the board. So I thought that I was okay with the existing questions, with the caveat that the last two might be combined into one.
Any other comments on questions? Oh, I see.
Well, I agree. Having just gone through this, I think the questions are really good. And the last two are excellent because, again, you do not want somebody on there who's just strictly, this is one thing they're interested in. It needs to be all over roundabout.
Any other comments about the interview questions or suggestions? No? Okay. All right. So I think we need to vote to approve the two tab members who have volunteered to be our subcommittee for interviewing candidates. So could I have a motion for that, please?
I move that we select board members Starrett and Palmino to be our interview committee, and that we use the same questions as previous committees have used.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, next up we have bicycle parking standards, proposed changes and feedback.
I'm last again. I'm beginning to take offense. Good evening. My name is Ben Ortiz, Transportation Planner, and we're going to be looking at amendments to Longmont Land Development Code, Chapter 1505080J, which is the bicycle parking. We tabled this at the March 9th meeting. So we could make some recommended amendments, and then hopefully we can get some direction from you on this item. Let's see. So again, we're hoping we can get your recommendation to City Council on whether or not we can approve this. And then ultimately we will take this up to City Council on a date yet to be determined. So some of the things we're not going to consider at this time, and there were a few that were discussed. The first two, items 1 and 2, we after thinking about this some, we chose not to pursue these because they run in conflict with the direction that we were given by City Council. And that is to generate an ordinance resulting in a bike parking requirement based on land use. And so both of those are in direct conflict to that direction. The third item, which is requiring more bike parking of a developer if it is discovered more is needed once development's open, or requiring upgrades of bike parking or addition of bike parking at previously existing developments. And after consulting with the city attorney's office, they basically stated that items 3 and 4 would be illegal and would likely result in lawsuits. And so we're not going to pursue that either. The last thing, item 5, and I feel I need to provide a little more clarification on this, but allowing for interior rooms inside principal use, like an office building, to meet long-term bike parking requirements. And so the reason why I'm steadfast on this is fairly simple. I did a lot of development review for quite a number of years, did a lot of project management, worked with a lot of developers, and I don't want to say this is true of all developers, but many of them are very dishonest people. And they sell their own mother for $1, and they lie as effortlessly as they breathe. And I hate to say that, but it's likely true. So I feel like this is an opportunity for them to get out of a requirement. So they say that I can do an interior room. I don't have to spend the several $1,000s for an outside shelter. A couple years down the road, the market's hot. They realize they can lease that space if they convert it to an office for several $1,000s. And I can foresee that they would do that. Now, the response might be, well, the people who are using that interior room just need to call the city. Most people aren't going to know how to do that. Most people won't know that it's a site plan violation. They won't know that they need to call the city. And so it's very unlikely that that would happen. And so this is one of the reasons why we'd like to keep these external so that we can see them from the street. If it gets removed, we know immediately that there's a site plan violation, and we can follow up on that. So the First Amendment is really just a typo. It's in the very last sentence, as you can see. Previously it read, added security measures may including cameras or attendants to ensure greater theft or vandalism protection. And we changed including to include. And so Amendment 2, and this is the recommended amendment by Board Member Starrett, which previously read for new developments requiring 20 or more bicycle parking spaces, 10 inverted U racks, at least 50% of the bike parking shall be adequately covered to protect bicycles from inclement weather, et cetera, et cetera. And that was changed to read for new developments requiring 20 or more bicycle parking spaces, 10 inverted U racks, a minimum of 20 covered bicycle parking spaces, or 50% of the total, whichever is greater, shall be adequately covered to protect bicycles from inclement weather. And I hope I got that right. I was listening to the audio after the fact, and so that is my interpretation of that particular amendment. So then Board Member Wickland indicated that he felt a concern about the long-term bike parking that was allocated for multifamily developments and felt that was a little bit low. So we changed it to what you see here in red. So the long-term bike parking requirement was previously 1 for the first 20 units. Now it is 1 for the first 10 units. And then subsequent to that was +1 for every additional 10 units. Now it is +1 for every additional 5 units, but not less than 1. So I did the math on this. If you have a 100-unit building, that would result in 19 long-term bicycle parking spaces that would be required. If they choose lockers, for example, then that would be 19 lockers. And a lot of people who have expensive bikes, they'd probably choose to just keep them in their home, in their apartment. The Amendment 4, there was some discussion on car washes, and I felt based on that it made sense to distinguish between a manned car wash and an automated car wash. So I added to the new use category of automated, in which case bike parking would not be required. So that's it. The next steps are we hope to take this up to the Planning and Zoning Commission in May. I'm not sure I can get on that agenda yet, but we will see. And then subsequent to that would be a stop to City Council. And again, that is a date to be determined. Again, part of what determines that is whether or not we can get up to Planning and Zoning Commission in May, and then whether or not the agendas, subsequent council agendas, aren't so full that we can't fit in. And so, that being said, we're seeking a recommendation from the TAB on the amendments, and with that, I'd like to take your questions.
So I just have a question, which probably goes back to not understanding last month. So I'm looking at this thing here. Independent living under the minimum short-term bicycle, 1 per unit. That means per building or per apartment?
1 per living dwelling.
So if you had 100 units.
It would be 100. And if you're looking, and for the short term, that would be the inverted U bicycle rack. And so each inverted U bicycle rack is equal to 2 spaces. So that would be 50 bicycle parking racks.
Okay. That's what I did. Thank you.
For the car wash difference, I thought that the proposed wording was a little clunky, manned versus automated, especially because, like, does an automated car wash mean like automatic pull through? There's like the machine that does everything for you, but there's still staff there, or does it mean something different, sort of like the smaller ones that aren't totally staffed but are like attached to a gas station? So I think maybe the difference you're looking for on car washes is staffed versus unstaffed, because I'm thinking of like the ones where they're just like basically a shack with some hoses, and you pull up, there's no staff there, but you can just use a vending machine or whatever.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I can make that change.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you, Ben. I didn't expect this to come back to us so soon, so I'll ask kind of the same questions as before. What's your timeline? When do you want this to go to council?
I don't have a timeline, except that I do want it, the expectation is to continue moving it forward as we can. So, again, part of it hinges on us being able to go up to Planning and Zoning Commission first. We may be able to go in May. It sort of depends on, what's
their
on
scheduling.
Yeah, what's on their agenda right now. I think they only have one other item right now. I don't know if they've added anything since I last checked, and so May is looking likely. And then after that, when we can go up to the City Council sort of depends on what they have on their agendas. And what the city manager feels when the right timing would be. So it's a little up in the air right now.
Okay. Then I think the last month I did mention that I think I used actually the words that I think the numbers are flipped for like multifamily, 1 per each unit. So for short term, because I'm envisioning, especially if apparently we're not going to do a district-wide basis. So like I think of like a downtown, then I think of South Main Station. There's 315 units there. So if a developer wants to build a 315 unit building, you're going to put 100 and nearly 160 U inverted bike racks.
That would be the new Under the new regulations, right. So under the old regulations or the present regulations, it's based on the number of motor vehicle parking spaces.
Right.
And so, but they have a lot of different types of uses in there, obviously. So there's the multifamily, and then there's the retail, and then of course then there's the bus depot itself. And so all of those categories would be handled separately.
And I think that's where I have issues of how we come up with these numbers, because just as what we've done for 50 plus years of having an excessive amount of car parking also created an ugly city. So that's why I really want to try to think about this carefully, and not just put numbers, like really figure out why we're doing one per unit for short term, when I think it could be flipped for long-term storage, and there should be probably fewer short-term, especially for a massive development of 300 plus units. Obviously, a multifamily unit where it's a fourplex is very different than a 300-unit building. So it gets complicated in what I visualize what we want the city to look like.
Well, I would like you to hearken back to those context photos I showed you the last time around. So one motor vehicle parking space is a 9 by 18 space can provide up to 10 bike parking spaces. So in reality, what we're asking for,
that's 10, but five inverted U racks.
There would be 5 inverted U racks in each motor vehicle parking space, which would amount to 10 short-term bike parking spaces. So we're not really, in the grand scheme of things, we wouldn't even bat an eye to provide that much. I mean, if we were somewhere else in some other city, we wouldn't bat an eye about saying, well, we need to provide 350 parking spaces, motor vehicle parking spaces. But now we're saying, well, that seems like a lot when we're talking about bike parking. In the grand scheme of things, it's not. So, I can think about it. Yeah. But I don't.
I think the logic is great. I think we need, especially for multifamily, we need secure parking for residents, because I think if you have ground level storage, people are going to be more prone to actually use their bicycle rather than going up and down an elevator or some stairs.
I agree.
So I think that's great, and I think the emphasis should be there. The short term is where I have kind of issues, because especially around mixed use development, that then turns into multifamily. It's like, all right, where's the short term? Is there going to be an excessive amount where then just like parking, we created an ugly city and longer distance to get anywhere. Even though your point is that bikes take up a whole lot less space, I 100% agree. I just don't know if we're there yet, in my opinion. And then the district-wide basis, what was the council direction that makes us think that we're not going to focus on district-wide? Because Popkin was kind of the one who brought that up the last meeting.
Right. Well, okay, so the specific direction was to provide bike parking based on a use basis. Mm-hmm. So let's say we're looking at a commercial zoning district. So that would be a district-wide. So within a commercial zoning district, you might have retail or restaurants or offices or churches, perhaps. So you have a lot of different uses that generate a lot of different type of bicycle use. And so you could do it on a district-wide basis, but the thing is, we already have a bike rack fund that purchases bike racks, that we refurbish bike racks with. We pay installers to install bike racks, and we're already doing that now.
Yeah, I know.
Right? And so so why are we reinventing the wheel? Well, the other half of this is that this requirement is specifically for developers who want to come in and they want to develop a site. And then they need to know what requirements they need to follow in order for them to get their certificate of occupancy once they've met all the requirements. And so it's very site specific. If you're focusing on the district, it's not that.
Yeah.
Right? And so then there's the other problem with the cash in lieu, which was the other idea that was thrown out there. And my concern with the cash in lieu part is the developer will take advantage of that, and they'll say, oh yeah, okay, well here's, $500, and I don't have to worry about it. So they don't put bike parking on their site because it's not convenient for them, or they just don't want it, or they don't think anyone will use it. And then you go an entire generation with no bike parking on this site.
Right.
So that was the other reason why we chose not to go either route. But hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense from a very much a requirement standpoint. And I think just as car parking, we incentivize people to drive, and we can incentivize people to bike, which then will relieve congestion and make people, who knows, maybe healthier. So I 100% agree that we need to do something. I just don't know if we're there yet. And then this is where I kind of bring up my final point because last meeting we talked about these numbers that were just we put the numbers in there to reflect what the parking minimums used to be. Have you done other research around the country of any other cities trying to do this, and what their numbers might be? And
the numbers were all very different. I looked at 10 different bike parking codes, a couple from California, a couple back east, and so they all had different numbers, which makes sense. I mean, when you consider that whoever was generating those, they were probably looking at the needs of their own community and trying to guess what would make sense there. So, and there were some similarities. There isn't, to my knowledge, at least not in the U.S., there isn't the equivalent of the ITE Parking Generation Manual, or the Institute of Transportation Engineers Parking Generation Manual for bicycles. If there is something out there, I haven't seen it. So there isn't that overarching, like, this is what you should do. Yeah. And I wouldn't trust it even if there was one.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, this is like a best guess. And really the way you'd get at correct numbers is to do it and then do bike parking studies after the fact. And it is something that would take a lot more time than what I have to do.
Okay. So now back to the district basis, if a building downtown, they demolish a building, they build a brand new building in historic downtown, where those buildings are built to the property line, would they be required to then add parking?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that's where my point is, do we create an ugly city when I would say there's some districts, such as transportation corridors, like the future train station, downtown areas where the city could be smart and focus the parking where people need to go, not every single individual business. So, I sent you that fun video of a dream of what we could be someday, and that's what I think the city should advocate for. The transit center, for example, we should build excessive amounts of parking and long-term parking there, because it makes sense. It's a transportation hub. I think this, I don't know. I have a problem with the numbers and a problem with how we're coming up with the numbers, which is where I would strongly encourage to buy that manual that I've also emailed. I think my first email was 6 months ago. So,
Yeah.
So
Fair
you
enough.
know, I want just data. That's all. Thank you.
Sure, I understand. And again, an overarching policy like this, there's going to be instances in which it'll be difficult to meet. But we do have options to offer variances,
Okay.
and we do have or minor modifications. And a minor modification that is something that we can approve at a staff level, and that's a 25% variation on any numeric value. So anything beyond that becomes a variance. And so that's a significant amount. And so that's an option to us currently. That doesn't change. And then, of course, the variance option, which would require Planning and Zoning Commission approval.
I'll bring up a little story about variance. A development project that I was involved in here in town. I won't say the name for controversy reasons. That developer avoids variances. Small developer, they avoid because it delays time, which then you put that cost somewhere. And that developer is actually experiencing delays from actually, and then also reduction in units. That is only going to increase cost for potential buyers. So, I like that you can reform the code in the moment, but the cost doesn't go away. So, and don't get me wrong, Ben. I want this, because car parking destroyed cities, and really put cost burden on people. So we could make something really good. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I hate to belabor this independent living thing, but I'm thinking, so you have the multi-generational facilities, you also have the senior facilities. So I'm thinking, is there a way to have some sort of flexibility with a senior facility? Because I'm thinking 50 short-term bicycle parking spaces in 100 unit. I could see it in multi-generational. But in a senior, is there a way to have some flexibility to say, that's a little bit much?
Sure. Yeah, I think so. Again, there's the minor modifications, so that's a 25% reduction right there, and that's something they can just ask for and we can grant during the review process. It would not require a public hearing or going before Planning and Zoning Commission. So there's quite a bit of flexibility, both to add more or to reduce more right there. Okay, and that has always been available. It will always be available, and it would apply in this case as well.
Okay.
So yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Ben. I was wondering, I didn't see in your updates, it was a question I had last time, was about I think it's 20% change in development will require the is it 20% or 25? Did you get any clarification about whether that percentage could be reduced, or does it have to be 25?
There is no ability to be flexible with that number. So the city attorney's office was pretty clear on that. And here's what he wrote. I'll tell you exactly his quote, if I can find it. So the city attorney wrote, Chapter 1508 appears, and this is the section on non-conforming uses. So Chapter 1508 appears to apply to all of Title 15, including the bicycle standards at 1505-080J. The language you propose appears to comply with Chapter 1508. To the TAB member's question, we cannot legally require changes to non-conforming bicycle parking without it being tied to some change to the property, in this case, a change of use or expansion of the structure. To do so would create legal liability for due process issues and possibly exaction takings clause. If the property is changing, we're allowed to make the property come into compliance with the updated city standards. And sadly, we can't use a magic wand to require everyone to come into compliance without facing serious legal challenges. And Chapter 1508 specifically states that the change would have to be in excess of 25% before that non-conforming requirement kicks in. So it's pretty hard and fast, is what the city attorney's office indicated to me. And so that when I wrote it, I wrote it to be consistent with that section, because I believe that to be true based on my own experience.
Okay, that's a little annoying, because 25% is pretty. Yeah, it goes. Pretty substantial change.
Yeah, it goes to the Fifth Amendment of our Constitution. So.
Well, we could just. Okay. So I wanted to think about more with properties like in downtown where they don't have enough land to meet these new requirements on bike parking. If they made a big change of 25% or more, instead of doing the variances, which makes sense, but why not at this point add in some language related to that to allow for those properties that don't have enough land to create those new bike parking spaces? Can we not add like a section in there about if you don't have enough land to meet this requirement, then you can come up with some other solutions.
Pay downtown to.
Yeah, like some solution.
Sure.
To that aspect.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can certainly think about it, and just so you know, that there's a subsection of the Longmont Downtown Development Authority, the LDDA area, called the General Improvement District, and forever they have had no motor vehicle parking requirement whatsoever. I mean, no parking maximums, no minimums, and that has worked, I think, fairly well, because if you had a parking requirement, you would be tearing down buildings in order to meet it, which doesn't make any kind of sense. I think people can walk a couple of blocks. It's not bad for them. Mm-hmm. So I can think about that and see. We're kind of going beyond what we were, we said we should do to take more comments, but I think those are good ones. And so I'll look at it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not trying to make it onerous, but we want to try and make this as good as we can with the situation we have, in my opinion, so that we don't have to make a lot of big changes if we can avoid it up front. It's my thinking. Yeah, I can't think of any other questions right now, but does anyone else have any more comments for Ben or suggestions?
Yeah, I think we're almost there. All right, Ben. For me to hammer the multifamily thing, I think the numbers are flipped, is kind of my beef about it. Promote more long-term for your apartment dwellers rather than short-term.
I'm going to sit if you don't mind.
Yeah. And then I think, even though apparently it's against council direction of the district-wide basis, I think there are moments where, bikers generally, like when I'm biking, I always park my bike in front of a busy business because I know it's watched. As we get higher percent of people biking, there'll be a little less worry there. And also a biker typically will also be willing to walk. So like a downtown willing to walk a block. You know, we can moan about all the complaints from car drivers not figuring out where to park, but I think that also can happen in like a mall. So like Village at the Peaks, it's like they could have a more long-term solution in a section. So like a similar type development. So maybe not individual business per se or individual buildings, but you know, I'm just trying to think where that district approach could happen. And then the city should always go above and beyond. So for transit centers, city buildings, community hubs. So, but if no one minds, I would like to table this discussion until we hear from P&Z and hear what their comments are, and since they are the master of the code. If there'll be a second.
Yes, I second the motion to table the issue at hand.
Any comments on that motion before we proceed with the vote? Okay.
When do they meet again?
Potentially May.
Oh, man.
Potentially.
Okay. Sounds reasonable.
Okay. Let's do a vote then on the motion at hand. All in favour of
Aye.
pending? Okay. I'm sorry, Ben.
All right. Hopefully I'll go first next time. Thank you.
All right. Waiting for my computer. Okay. Let's see. Comments from board members. So I wanted to, before we start going along our line of comments from board members, I did talk to Cami a little bit about what she said last meeting about limiting our scope of comments to just what was discussed during that meeting. And I wanted to get some additional clarification on what that really meant. And I think, at least from my perspective, it felt quite limiting, and that then we wouldn't be able to talk about things that were on our mind or something that we observed that we wanted the city staff to look into. So in my conversation with Cami, she wanted to reiterate that talking about upcoming events or things that just happened, that maybe you just attended the Front Range Passenger Rail event that was just a few days ago. Maybe you want to make some comments about that. That is all great for comments because it's just kind of a on in the moment type of comment. But asking questions about, like, can you look at this, and I want to know about this right now, from staff when they're not prepared, is something that she said, yes, absolutely, bring up the suggestion or comment, but just in mind of, we're going to talk about it next meeting, or there'll be follow-up after the meeting, and not expecting a really long conversation back and forth between staff and the board. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone, and I can get more clarification from... We're talking again tomorrow because our meeting... we had too much to say. So I'm going to get some more conversations with her tomorrow about how we might want to think about this a little bit more, but I just wanted to make it clear to the rest of the board that please don't limit to yourself to just today's topics, but if there's something you want staff to look at too, or if you have a question that you want staff to look at, then please bring it up, but don't expect like a big long conversation. Okay, now that I've done that, we can go along.
All right. I want to say thank you to everyone. You brought a lot of detail today that was great to see. Love detail, love good discussion. We ran a little over. I think that's an indication that we are actually having meaningful conversations. I was able to attend both the Longmont Town Hall for Front Range Passenger Rail as well as the follow-up joint service announcement the next morning. And a couple of things from that joint service announcement that I thought were really noteworthy are, we have 3 round trips per day, and they are spread throughout the day. So you have a morning in both directions, a midday in both directions, and an evening in both directions, which is, to me, very exciting, and I think will make the service much more useful than the peak service study that RTD put out a few years ago. Also, the cost estimates are much lower. My understanding is that it's partially because BNSF is more open to passenger service at this point because of reduced coal traffic, as well as the state coming with one request for access, as opposed to RTD and possibly the state later coming with separate requests. So the cost is down to $333 million estimated for capital projects. So that would be our stations, track upgrades, our quiet zones, things like that. And then $25 to $35 million annually for operational expenses. And RTD is expected to pay roughly half of those capital costs. So this would be RTD fulfilling some of their fast tracks obligations. Not all of them, but some of them. And then, yeah, I think that it's actually possible we'll see a train running in 2029. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll be something. And then the last thing I have to say is, Liz, your enthusiasm was infectious. All right, thank you.
Well, thank you for that update. I wasn't able to go to that meeting, but I obtained the slides after the fact. Great presentations tonight. I just want to clarify one thing. I did misspeak. I meant when we were looking at the equity map from Vision Zero and intersections and other high-risk network areas. My reference was from 2 months ago of the Hawk signal at 17th, not Hover, 17th and Lakeshore. And I hope the city is looking at this map as we make decisions on where we spend dollars. Because from the maps we saw tonight, we could probably get better bang for our buck elsewhere. So, which always makes me wonder why certain things get done and not others. So, other than that, I'm excited for the Vision Zero map. I think it will also help with my request last month of 3rd and Main and my issues there that I've mentioned a few times at this board. So I'll see progress when I see progress. All right. Good night.
Good meeting, folks.
It was a very good meeting. I learned a lot, and it was very interesting. And unfortunately, I missed that April 8th passenger rail update because I've been very interested in that. I missed that meeting, but I got some good information tonight, so thank you.
Lines at the front with the meeting, I have a lot of the same impressions that board member Starrett had about the Front Range passenger meeting, especially the enthusiasm and excitement of the elected officials, the city staff, and the public all had a real positive kind of energy going there that you don't often see in these kind of large public works projects. And there's a lot of optimism there, and hopefully it comes to fruition. So I thought it was a good meeting, well presented as well.
Thank you, staff, for sticking with another meeting that went over. We seem to be running out of time a lot this year. I guess we have lots to talk about. There's lots going on. So thank you for sticking with us and your patience with all of our comments. I attended both of those meetings as well, and I have similar good feedback about the rail project. I was really impressed. I think I read in the paper there's like more than 200 people that came to the Longmont meeting, which is, I mean, I've never seen a museum so full. Like, there was people standing because they couldn't find a seat, which I was really impressed about. And I was expecting a lot of negativity, but really it was very positive, and people seemed people were like, you know, getting really excited about it. So that gives me hope that the community is really on board with it. At least of those 200 people who attended, are really positive about it. If you wanted to attend, they are having more of those. I think there's one in Boulder in a few weeks. Yeah. So there are other opportunities if you wanted to still get that information. And an event coming up, which the city is involved in terms of they are sponsoring, is Longmont Earth Day. It's something I organise for my work, but it's also sponsored by now 5 different city departments, including transportation. It is on Saturday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Timberline. And we are going to be having a bike collection drive. So if you have any old bikes that you don't want anymore and you want to donate, and they will go to good places depending on condition, you're welcome to bring those. But we will be having a great event again. So this is the 12th year. So if you are interested, it's a local event coming up on Saturday. Okay, all right. We do not have City Council liaison today. So we're going to go through proposed next agenda items.
So I believe next month's meeting in May, we have our Chief Financial Officer coming to talk all about budget. So it'll be a pretty packed agenda. I don't know that we have room for other in-depth informational items at that meeting. We certainly can bring you quick staff updates, but planning on using the majority of the May meeting to discuss budget, how that works. I know we had quite a few questions about budget as related to Vision Zero tonight, so hopefully May's meeting can shed some more light on how that process works.
Okay, great. All right, I think it is time to adjourn, so do I have a motion for adjournment?
I motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. Well.
Whatever.
All right. Yeah, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
All right. 8:35.